welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today in the show, we have Allison Edwards. She's a family physician, and we're going to talk about her Kevin MD article, I Wanted to Care for People, so I Became a Direct Primary Care Doctor. Allison, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We'll get into your article in a little bit. First off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Absolutely. So I am born and raised in the Midwest. I joke that I'm devoted to landlocked states. I ended up going to University of Kansas for my medical training and then University of Colorado for residency where I was chief. And what's interesting is that the article itself talks about that transition from, what I thought maybe my career was going to be in residency, and as residency progressed into kind of where it took me.
All right. So since your article is such a big part of your story, let's jump right into that. So talk about that article and talk about that transition point in your life.
Absolutely. I hope that a lot of physicians go into medicine with the ambition to care for people, to be caretakers. And I'm no different. That was my bend. That was why I went into it. That's why I went into primary care. It's not necessarily the quote unquote rational choice in medicine because we all know primary care is not as well compensated as all the specialties. But for me, it was more than the monetary motivation. It was the intrinsic motivation to help people. And so I followed that track. I matched into a residency program through Denver Health with their FQHC location. We took care of all of the refugees coming in through the state of Colorado. And so we would see just so many different cultures, so many different languages. And it was incredible to give to this population. But the more I moved through my training and my practice and took on more and more patients, as we all do from intern to second to third year, I realized that the way that the system was set up to try and help these people wasn't actually accomplishing that goal in a meaningful way. And this is my opinion, obviously. I think a lot of people quibble with me on the way the FQHC system is set up. But what I realized was that those 15-minute visits on that treadmill over and over all day, that I was not able to address the needs of my patients who had suffered severe trauma, who were in a different culture, who some of them didn't even know what a prescription was. I remember one time talking to somebody about chapstick, another time about sunglasses, right? Like the level of care that I needed to provide was more than just slapping a prescription at somebody and moving on. Like these people needed high touch. And so that was where my dissatisfaction with the FQHC system and frankly with the fee-for-service insurance-based system really started to set in, and where I started to think more and more about direct primary care, getting the insurers out of the room, thinking about how do we holistically serve the patient sitting right in front of us.
Yeah, so I think certainly what you describe, I'm a primary care physician myself, every 15 to 20 minutes, and there are some doctors who see between 30 and 40 patients per day. I'm certainly fortunate to see only between 18 and 20 a day, but your high touch, I think, is a great way to put it, because it's very difficult for us in primary care to do that. Now, before we get into talking more about direct primary care, for those who aren't familiar with that model, just give a brief direct primary care 101 just to get everyone on the same page.
Absolutely. And thank you for letting me explain, because some people are like, oh yeah, I know about that. Concierge. Not quite. So the concierge model is one I think that is heard about more. And how we in the direct primary care world define that is that in concierge, you're billing insurance still. And then on top of that, you're doing some sort of a retainer or an access fee. So you're getting paid twice. In the direct primary care model, we provide unlimited primary care for a flat monthly fee, and we don't use third-party payers for that. Phil Askew came up with a really good definition in 2015 that was published, and that's the one that we've stuck with, is just the unlimited primary care. If there is a copay of some sort, some DPC clinics do charge a copay. That copay is significantly less than that monthly fee. And then of course the no third-party payments. So that is the crux of DPC.
All right. So now that we've defined it, tell us about that journey into the direct primary care world.
Absolutely. So like I was saying, I was in residency and please read my article because I think it makes this a lot more emotional and is a lot more nuanced than what I'm describing right now. But at the end, I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. And I was like, I'm going to start my own direct primary care practice. So I packed up, we left Denver. I went back to Kansas City, where I'm from, hung my shingle, bootstrapped, took some locum shifts, financed it myself, and opened the doors on January 2nd of 2017, which hilariously, like, this is how bad of a business person I was. Like, that was the federal holiday. Nobody was working and nobody expected doctors' offices to be open. And I flipped my open side and I stood there proudly, and I have zero patients because it's like not an appropriate day to be open as a clinic. So I share that because what I learned quickly was that I was a doctor, but I was also starting on this journey of becoming a business person and an entrepreneur and a small business owner. And that was one that I wanted to care for people first and foremost. And the whole business of medicine came as a sidecar attached to my journey to provide the best patient care possible. It's really interesting.
So tell me about how that start was. Did you have any mentors? Did someone teach you how to do this? How did you go about starting something like this?
Yeah, the direct primary care community is an amazing network of people who are very supportive of one another. If you have the ambition to open a direct primary care practice, there are even in your neighborhood, there are mentors available. Connect with them. Google direct primary care near me, see who's there. If you are obviously, kind and not abusive of somebody's time and bandwidth, you will get a lot of really great support and networking out of that. And so that's what I did. There were some amazing trailblazers that I was lucky enough to have near me who provided a lot of incredible insight. And then I also like to tell residents and students who are interested in direct primary care, you're a physician. You have been taught how to learn, or I should hope you've been taught how to learn. You can't possibly learn everything in med school and residency. And so you have this skill set of teaching yourself. And business is no different than any other subject. You can teach yourself quite a bit through reading and trial and error and hiring good professionals to be around you.
So we've been talking about direct primary care for about, I would say, 10, 15 years now. And what's the status of direct primary care in 2022? If a primary care physician is eager to transition into a direct primary care model, how difficult is it for that person?
That is the question with direct primary care, right? There's a lot of options. So for those who are risk adverse, maybe, who want to make sure that they can continue to have that set salary, expected salary, there are some sort of DPC-like entities out there. They tend to be serving like employers or on-site clinics or things like that. And I'm happy if anybody wants to talk offline about like the brands associated with that. So there are those options. And those are pretty cool because they operate on a capitated payment model. Taking a step down, if you're like, I don't really want to work for somebody and I'm okay with bearing a little bit of risk with regard to starting with a smaller company or a mom and pop shop, the DPCs that started, you said 10, 15 years ago, they're growing. They're looking for partners. They're looking for people to join. And so that gives you a level of autonomy that you may be looking for and allows you to be in a direct primary care practice without starting one. But those smaller mom and pop operations, my clinic, we don't have the same bandwidth that a corporate model does, right? Like you have to bear a little bit more risk when you work with a smaller entity. And then of course you can jump in and start your own direct primary care practice. And there are a lot of people out there who are still like, that's it, that I want to own my own, I want to be the entrepreneur, I want to be my business owner. It's always a welcome addition to any community because a rising tide raises all ships.
Sure.
We are not competitors. There's enough people around to get everybody in.
So we always hear about some of the great pros of direct primary care, more time with patients, and you have a smaller patient panel, better work-life balance, things like that.
Yeah.
But in general, how successful are direct primary care practices? I often actually don't hear about these direct primary care practices that go out of business and things like that. But in general, how successful are they?
So there's not like official market data, right? There's nobody who's out there with a pencil and a clipboard taking stock of everybody. So all I can offer is anecdotes. And the best way to answer that question is to say that a direct primary care practice started by a physician from the ground up, similar to what I did, is a small business. And not every small business succeeds. It does take a certain amount of grit, of tenacity, of willingness to learn some new things like website design and SEO marketing, and frankly, like OSHA rules and payroll if you're going to hire people and bring them on. And there are people who are drawn to it because they're like, yes, I want to be my own boss and I want to do all this. And then once they start to get into the nitty gritty and the weeds, they're like, actually, deuces, not my thing, not what I want. And so going back to your previous question, if you're interested in direct primary care and the idea of running a small business or managing people or learning all of those like CLIA waivers, things like that, like if that's not for you, find a direct primary care practice out there that's hiring because you would be a welcome addition. If you are, so they say, drinking the Kool-Aid of direct primary care, there are places out there for you. And so I don't have a good specific answer as to like how many succeed, how many fail, other than if you look at some of the aggregators, the maps out there, the number of clinics is just growing year after year. The conferences are well attended. The number of people who are entering into this it's growing year after year. And so there's certainly momentum behind the movement.
So let's take a step back and ask a more macro question. What do you see as direct primary care's role going forward? Do you still see it as a growing niche? Do you see it as a model that can take over general primary care? So what do you see direct primary care's role in the next few years?
But you're looking at like the biggest cheerleader for direct primary care. So my answer is going to be maybe different than somebody else's, but I think that direct primary care is the only way to practice primary care that makes sense. I think so. To answer, I think it should take over.
Yeah,
I think it should be the way that we default to.
sure.
And there's a lot more behind that answer because I think implementing a practice model, quote unquote, at scale involves a lot of things that need to be thought about in a really pointed manner. I think that there was an excellent quote that I heard from an economist out of the University of Michigan, whose name I cannot remember off the top of my head, but he basically said that scale in today's modern society is when we stop thinking about humans as humans. We stop thinking about our customers and our employees as humans, and we start thinking about them as values on a spreadsheet. And that's what everybody is annoyed with, and that's what everybody hates about like the modern society scaled business, is that all of a sudden you lose the human touch. And what makes direct primary care wonderful is that we have stripped everything away and have just gotten back to the physician and the patient, and that is what it is. We have put that human relationship at the center of the business enterprise. Every primary care relationship should be like that. I'm serious. Like I think every person should have a primary care physician that they have a direct relationship with, that nobody gets in the way of, that no insurer meddles up. I just think that if a corporation's like, yeah, let's do that at scale, they are perhaps not going to be the best ones to implement it. It needs to be done, but I believe strongly that it's the way to care for people.
How do you answer one of the biggest criticisms of direct primary care? So, if direct primary care were to be the default model,
Sure.
we already have a clinician shortage, and
Yeah.
direct primary care clinicians, by definition, they have smaller panels, and
Yep.
that's just going to mean less access. So, how do you answer that?
My answer to that is a little bit more macro. It's we do have a clinician shortage. And I said this in my intro, primary care is not the most well-paid physician specialty. We don't really attract people because of the compensation. And so not only that, but primary care is a tough job. We talked about this, right? The clinicians
Yeah.
that rotate through 30 to 40 people over and over. And then on top of that, there's some good time studies that show that for every hour of clinical care, you're probably doing about 2 hours of
Yep.
paperwork. So if you're working a 40-hour, quote unquote, 40-hour clinical work week, you're being asked to do 120 hours of work in a week. Right? That doesn't make any sense. It's a really tough position to attract people. We just don't have a ton of people matching into it. And so the answer to that is that direct primary care may tighten up the availability of clinicians if we were all overnight to switch to it. But in the long run, it would become a more desirable profession because you would have autonomy, you would have the time with the patients, you'd be able to manage them without the insurance companies getting in the way. And not only that, but you can design a direct primary care clinic to a compensation level that you want, right? You can take on more people. There's no rule that says, you've got 600 patients, you need to
Yeah.
stop. So I think the answer is that direct primary care creates a better career, and that's how we actually change the dialogue on primary care and the primary care physician shortage.
We're talking to Allison Edwards. She's a family physician, and we're talking about her Kevin in the article. I wanted to care for people, so I became a direct primary care doctor. So, Allison, for those primary care physicians who are interested in transitioning, they're tired of hospital-based practices and
Sure.
fee-for-service system. What's the immediate next step that they should do if they want to consider transitioning to direct primary care?
Google direct primary care doctor near me and get in touch with the person closest to you who is already doing this. That is the first step. Be respectful, please. Like they're busy. Don't just show up in their office and demand an audience, but do some good old online stalking. Always a good first start. The next is that there are some trade organizations out there that can be really helpful, that can give you not like the personal, like on the ground story of how does my DPC work, but rather the nuts and bolts. There's the Docs for Patient Care Foundation, the Direct Primary Care Alliance, DPC Frontier, Direct Primary Care Coalition. And then, of course, the AAFP has a really good online resource for direct primary care. So there's some really good larger trade associations out there that can give you more guidance as well. And it's possible. I think the big thing to just reiterate, and what I say to so many people, is that if it is meaningful to you, and it is something that you want to do, and talk with your significant other, your family, or whatever, because financially, especially if you jump off and you're like, I'm going to start anew, it's tough, but it is the most rewarding thing. It is absolutely worth it, and you will figure out how to make it work.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin and the audience?
Absolutely. So number one is direct primary care is absolutely worth looking into. If you're a specialist listening and you're seeing patients who you're like, man, why they need a good primary care home, please, same thing, direct primary care doctor near me, Google it. It does require some discretionary income, right? That is also the elephant in the room. If your patient fits that category, direct primary care doctors are going to be great to be the quarterback of that person's healthcare journey. So send them there. The other take home point I think we've discussed ad nauseum is just it's possible, you can do it. I really want to empower primary care doctors out there to explore that entrepreneurial journey, become independent. Like, we don't need to be beholden to hospital systems. There's a whole world out there of patients who need our services. And then the last one is just, I think that we can overly complicate medicine. And it's not that hard to just see that, like, the benefit from primary care comes from that relationship, the doctor with the patient, over time, continuity, learning what makes them tick, and seeing them over a lifetime. I think you've seen probably the studies on quality of care and like the whole beast of trying to measure quality in primary care. It's an impossible task, but we do know that having comprehensive longitudinal primary care over a lifetime is associated with better outcomes, for better or worse. So it's an important thing to just strip it all away and just say, this is what's important.
Allison, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.